Well, joining me live is Republican strategist John Jordan. Thank you very much, John, for joining us. There's certainly been months of debate on this situation, but yes, just recently announced US President Joe Biden announcing the approval of the provision. It's highly controversial, these cluster munitions.
Yeah, there was an international agreement in 2008 which 120 countries prohibited their use. And even the United States law passed in 2009 prohibits the United States from distributing, manufacturing weapons with a dud rate, which means these little bombs go off or dropped, but they don't actually detonate, which means they're waiting potentially for some innocent to step on them later. A dud rate of less than 1%. And the Pentagon is saying that they're going to do better. They're going to have a dud rate of a little less than 2.35%. The story here, Janie, is that the Ukrainians need this capability, and this was the only way the administration really could give them to this as they deal with Russian artillery positions in these fixed positions. This isn't a Desert Storm type battle. This is reducing fixed fortifications and trying to degrade Russian manpower and logistics, and the Pentagon felt that this capability was necessary.
So do you think it should have been announced earlier then?
Well, it would have been better probably had they given them the F-16s or another way to achieve this end without the cluster munitions, or the long-range ATACMS or missiles for the HIMARS, which is a system the Ukrainians already have. They just need the longer-range variant of it. So this is kind of a piecemeal approach. Is this going to help the Ukrainians? You bet it will. But is this the best way to do it? I think that's arguable.
Yeah, because they're being used by Russia and Ukraine as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Russians have been using them. They have a dud rate, which is far higher. The U.S. munitions, a dud rate, which is far lower. And apparently the U.S. munitions are supposed to go inert after a period of time, which means they're rendered harmless. But I don't think anybody wants to go walk in a field where cluster bombs were dropped. So it remains to be seen how big of a difference and how the Ukrainians are going to deliver them. It looks like it'll be artillery shells, but the most effective cluster munitions are air deployed. And the Ukrainians may or may, have a limited ability to actually do what's called a combat air support or airstrikes on Russian positions due to the contested nature of Ukrainian airspace.
All right, look, well, let's change topics. And US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is calling on market reforms in China, and China's premier wants to meet her halfway and put bilateral relations back on track. Do you think they'll meet halfway?
No, I don't think so. Even the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the U.S. Department of State, both sides have said that there's not really going to be any positive outcomes or expect any real movement as a result of this meeting, which makes you wonder why she's going at all. It's a lot like little orphan Oliver and Oliver Twist saying, please, Governor, may I have some more? The Chinese government does not take the U.S. government seriously right now with the spy balloons and all of the other things they've been able to do and get away with without consequence or cost imposed from Washington. So now we have Janet Yellen going this week, and it looks like John Kerry is going to go to talk about climate change next week. But this is, to quote Shakespeare, sound and fury signifying nothing.
All right, well, the latest US jobs report is indicating that the economy is cooling by the looks of it. 209,000 new jobs in June. Is this a sign the Federal Reserve's moves to fight inflation are working?
Not really. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a bad jobs report, but it doesn't derail the Fed's tightening policy going forward. The consensus was at 240,000 jobs we added, and the number came in at 209. But some of the underlying numbers also showed continued heat and strength within the labor market and price pressures therein. So while it's not a bad report, it really doesn't going to do anything to shift the trajectory of the Federal Reserve as they continue their tightening cycle.
All right, and US journalist Evan Gershkovich, accused of espionage, has been in prison in Russia now for 101 days. Now, he remains in detention until at least the 30th of August, where he is awaiting trial. What's your take on this? We know that there is talk of a possible prisoner swap. We've had the US ambassador visit basically twice, and the second time just recently. So what are your thoughts?
Well, it looks like, Janie, that's your point is very good there. There has been some softening on the Russian position by allowing the ambassador to visit him twice, as you pointed out, and granting him American consular services of the American embassy in Russia. Russian sources over the last couple of days indicate an openness to a spy swap or a swap for somebody that the U.S. may have. Generally, when these swaps happen, one side signals that they're open to it. In this case, the Russians made that move. Now, the question remains, who in the United States or what does the United States have that Russia really wants that way they would trade for them? The problem, Janie, is the question then becomes, who do the Russians grab next? Because they got Brittany Griner, then they got Victor Bout, the arms dealer. They're going to want something for this, and there's probably going to be no end to this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right by the sounds of it. And finally, John, investigations are continuing regarding a bag of cocaine that was found at the White House. It caused a brief shutdown found near the West Wing. Secret Service leading the investigation. I guess it sort of, talks to how safe is the White House, lack of sniffer dogs. There's talk of, potential, what if, there were the substances like anthrax that we have seen in over the years.
Yeah, American media has been following this blow by blow as this story blew up. And it turns out that this bag of cocaine was not in a heavily traveled area. It was in an area where it was very secure. It was in the West Wing where the Situation Room is and the Oval Office is. Now, you'd think, right, this is the White House. The cameras at your average coffee shop in Canberra or Washington or where I live in Sonoma County is going to be able to tell who went in and who went out. So this needs to be investigated because you're right, it goes to safety because you can bring in cocaine one week, you can bring in ricin or anthrax the next. But this needs to be gotten to the bottom of, but this is politically sensitive and it remains to be seen if the administration and the federal law enforcement agencies are going to be forthcoming.
All right, always great to see you. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. John Jordan.
My pleasure.